And that's the backdrop, the pain of families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas, as the head of the International Red Cross is set to arrive and will meet with many of those families to address, well, what the international agency can do. Well, to help us answer that question, we are joined by Sarah Davies, the Public Relations Officer at the International Committee of the Red Cross, joining us from Jerusalem. Thank you very much, Sarah, for being with us. I want to open up with that point. The president of the ICRC, Mirjana Spolarczyk-Egger, will be meeting with the families this coming week. What will she be telling them? What sort of comfort can she offer?
Thank you so much, firstly, for having me. As the president does plan to visit Israel and meet with the families of these hostages, we do need to remember she has met with families multiple times in Geneva. Our main concern, her main concern during these conversations, is giving the families a space to discuss their concerns, their frustrations, their feelings, their emotions. I mean, this is not a scenario that people could have expected, and this has ripped people's lives apart. Our main concern during these conversations is to continue to reiterate that we are relentlessly working behind the scenes, as well as publicly, to call for the immediate release of those who are still unfortunately held hostage, as well as our immediate access so that we can check on their welfare, provide any medical treatment, and of course, really reestablish that contact between these family members who are desperately and have been desperately waiting for news for more than 2 months now.
Now, one of the things we've seen these families demand, and one of their biggest complaints, is that the ICRC has not had any access to these hostages to know if they're alive, if they're dead, what physical condition they are in. And one of the criticisms they've had is that the ICRC has not used any leverage to try to get access. We've seen them make demands such as conditioning aid to Gaza on getting that access. If that's the only lever you have, why has it not been used? And if there are other levers, what are they, and are they being used?
Thank you. I think this is, as you said, a big topic of discussion and something that is very important to clarify. So we are a neutral organization. We do not stand on any side of a conflict. We stand with the civilians who are impacted. While we have not yet been granted access or been given the correct conditions to access the hostages and check on their well-being and their medical needs, this needs to happen at a political level, this agreement. It is a very frustrating answer. We are well aware this is not always a popular, position for our organization to be in, but for us to try and force our way in, we don't have weapons. We do not have political affiliations. Our work, our organization, for 160 years now has been to work to provide support and assistance for civilians wherever they may be that have been impacted by the conflict. We will continue to do this behind closed doors, as I said, in direct discussion with, face-to-face, the leaders of Hamas, as well as any other authorities, political individuals, states, armed groups. We are really relentlessly activating every mechanism that we have to continue these discussions and make our calls, our insist to see the hostages known.
Now, one of the things you mentioned is that the ICRC claims to have zero political affiliation. I think the biggest criticism I've seen here in Israel, from the leadership level all the way down to the streets, is that when we look at the public statements made online by the ICRC, a mathematical breakdown of those statements shows that 77% solely condemn Israel, while only 7% solely criticize Hamas. That's an 11 times difference. How do we account for that discrepancy if there's no political bias?
I think, first of all, we need to remember that what is posted on social media, on our webpage, this is not the entire picture of what our work. I think you will find that in a lot of our posts, in many, if not all, of our public communications, we are very much focusing on the impact of civilians. Very rarely do we come out and use terms like condemnation of any specific side. Our concern about people, civilians who are not part of the being impacted. This is our, we're ever going to find a specific, apologies. Can you hear me?
I think, yes, I think we've reconnected now.
Okay. Sorry, what I was saying was in our public communications, it's only a part of this picture. What we very rarely do is use terms like condemn and name parties. This is part of our neutral position. This is part of our impartiality, our independence. If we have concerns about any aspect of an armed conflict, we take those concerns directly to the parties who are involved and we have these direct discussions with them. This is how we retain that trust, that we will not publicly come out and use very strong language talking about things like condemnation. And I think if you do review a lot of our public positions and stances, they are very much focused on the impact of the armed hostilities on the civilians themselves, rather than judging or blaming one side or another in any armed conflict where we work around the world.
I want to address one of the other responsibilities of the ICRC in this conflict, and this is to oversee much of the aid that is coming into Gaza right now, because, as you mentioned, the massive amount of care needed for the civilian population in an armed conflict zone. How is the ICRC ensuring that the aid is actually going to civilians? Because we've seen videos popping out of Gaza that show, and we're seeing this video on screen right now, that shows Hamas and other terror groups raiding trucks, taking that aid and making sure it goes to the war effort rather than to the civilians that so need it.
Of course, and this is a very valid concern in any armed conflict that we see, that aid will not go to the civilians but to those parties who are involved in the conflict. As an organization that does work in these volatile situations, in these very challenging contexts around the world, we have a very thorough, a very in-depth, multi-layered system and process to ensure that the aid that we distribute goes directly to the civilians who need it, whether that be medical supplies to our own surgical team who are working in Gaza right now, whether it be things like body bags, things like chlorine tablets, any type of assistance that we provide. We have a very thorough, in-depth system and process to ensure that the civilians who need it are the ones who receive it. We also do have, as per our mandate around the world, a relationship with the local authorities and with Hamas, as we have been working in Gaza for decades now. This would be part of our discussion, our direct conversation with Hamas, if there were any concerns about this.
I mean, we say that there are mechanisms, but we saw the video on screen. Those mechanisms don't appear to be working as well as you hoped for.
I did not see a video with the Red Cross truck, unless I am mistaken. I, of course, can't speak for any other agencies, but I can very confidently say that our concern is getting this aid, these supplies to the civilians who need it, and ensuring that that is where it goes. In a multi-layered system, we do it on the ground, in regional and in global levels, to ensure that the civilians, the ones who are not part of this fight, are the ones who receive this very, very critical aid.
And, I still have with me in studio, because he's been with me the entire show, Danny Ayalon, a former ambassador, who has had his own thoughts and insights on this and did want to ask a question as well, because there is still a lot of fear, of bias, a lot of the thoughts that there has not been enough done. And we do want to address those claims, Danny, so I want to give you a chance to jump in.
Yes. Well, first of all, I certainly agree with Ms. Davis about not the ICRC not in possession of, let's say, hard power. They don't have armored divisions that they can help them pursue their mission. But they do possess enormous amount of soft power in terms of their prestige, credibility, in terms of their moral authority. And I'm afraid all these are going to be lost if they do not bring back the hostages, or at least do not get a list or supply them with much needed medical medicine that they need. And here, where do I see the ICRC can work, maybe, if I humbly suggest, in a more effective, it is, yes, behind the scenes, it is with the political power, but I think here there should be a consistent pressure on Hamas and all those who master Hamas, whether it's Qatar. And if the ICRC will bring the message home that what they're doing is really war crimes which could affect them politically, including not having such a prestige and having in Doha international conferences. This is something that could work. ICRC can do it, maybe not out loud in the newspaper, but certainly by applying and meeting on a daily basis with leaders around the world and pleading for the hostages. And last thing I want to say, it's not a real, it's not dissimilar. When you're talking about the plight in Gaza, there are the Hamas, there is embedded, there is, of course, the population there, which are being human shields. Here we're talking about hostages who were taken out of their bed and children who are 9 months old. This is a total different. There's no hierarchy when you come to human lives, but there is a hierarchy when it comes to sufferings. And this is where the ICRC, I think, should have put all their prestige and political power. And I'm not seeing that happening. And this is very disappointing.
Sarah, how would you respond to that? Because he does bring up a point there that the credibility of the ICRC is on the line here in this conflict.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to have a discussion about this. For us, not in just this context or this conflict, but everywhere around the world, we are very aware that this neutrality, our position, is not always what people would choose. This is very emotionally polarizing. As you've said, we're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are suffering the consequences of this conflict and of the attacks on the 7th of October. I can very confidently and adamantly say we are pursuing all avenues available to us, whether that is on the ground level here, whether that is at regional level, whether that is our president continually in discussion with multiple world leaders, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as the Hamas leadership. She has gone and spoken to them face to face. Other delegates, other people in the International Committee of the Red Cross have done this as well. We are activating every single available mechanism to us in order to put this pressure and our calls for the immediate release of these hostages and our access to them at the top of our priority list. I really cannot emphasize that while, of course, we do not understand, what these families or what these hostages are living through, we do know that the suffering that they have experienced, having the very fabric of their lives torn apart is not something that is an easy fix. It's not something that people get over. We will relentlessly continue to work to do this. I can assure every family member who has been impacted by this. We will continue working to the best of our available options. We will continue to relentlessly work to ensure that these hostages can be reunited with their families. However, I would like to add that this does rely on a political negotiation, which we do not take any part in.
Well, I want to thank you, Sarah, for helping address much of the criticism that's been leveled at the ICRC, because it's a very difficult situation for everyone involved. Danny, I'm glad that you could join us to explain why many people do have these criticisms,